Well, let's first of all look at what you feel is wrong with the current district attorney's office.
I think if you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, and I've said this and I'll continue to say it, it's not a statistic to be manipulated. We checked with Alabama Office of Courts, AOC, and for the past 2 or 3, going into 4 years, we've had almost 4,000 felony cases in a backlog. They sit there, and we're not making any dents in it. I know I've been told and I've been hearing that there's a 20% or 21% reduction in crime, and yet there's been no inroads into that backlog. And people don't really understand what that means. That means there's 4,000 felony cases out there, probably multiple counts on many of them. Okay, so numerous. I mean, you probably could triple that number, really. But you've got that number of law enforcement, victims, witnesses, businesses who have to have witnesses take time off work. All those folks out there in this county are waiting. And many of them, I think press registers said like 36%, have been waiting for more than a year. And there comes a point where that not only is tragic for victims and law enforcement, it contributes to burnout in ADAs, it contributes to burnout in law enforcement. It is horrific for victims. It's unfair, it's unjust. But in addition to that, it affects every one of our pocketbooks, because anybody that's been sitting in jail, we're paying for. Anybody that's out on bond is not working 9 times out of 10. They've got felonies hanging over their head. So you've made them a less productive member of society, at least till we can get it over with. It takes umpteen trips to Bay Minette for law enforcement, and you're talking some of them from Gulf Shores and Orange Beach. So all that gas, guess what? We pay for. I mean, and it goes on and on and on. Mm-hmm. And I think and if you look at that ripple effect, what you're talking about is, if there's 4,000 cases out there, many of which will be settled, many of which are going to be resolved without a trial, and yet they're just sitting out there and they're being worked and our resources are being wasted working those cases, then we're not working serious felonies. That's just, you can't give quality representation to the people of this county if you're spending a lot of hours and wasting resources on busy work. So we've got to reduce that number. We've got to systematically change the way the DA's office processes cases so that we're focusing our resources and indicting those cases that need to be tried and resolving cases that can be resolved prior to ever indicting them. So we've just got to make some systematic, philosophical, and pragmatic changes in how we do our cases.
And I'm sure it's not a quick fix, but how do you correct that backlog? Well,
and it gets... The reality of it is, and people tell me, oh, don't ever say anything about resolution of a case and plead. But I'm not a politician. I'm really not, in the negative sense of the word. I'm a prosecutor who wants to lead that office. And let me just say that there are 80% or more of cases that are resolved without a trial across this nation and in this county. And that's a good thing. If a kid makes a mistake and has no prior record and steals a check and writes a bad check, we don't want to put that kid in prison necessarily. And there are cases out there, a large quantity of cases, that are just easy to resolve prior to a trial and without a trial. So we resolve those cases not a year and a half or 2 years later, not a year and a half or 2 years of busy work. We resolve those cases within 180 days of trial. Your victims go ahead and get closure. They start getting their restitution. The defendant is under probation, under the supervision of the court, not out on bond where they don't have supervision. Mm-hmm. So you're fixing issues there. What you've done then is you've reduced the number of cases that have to go through our grand jury process. So we're indicting fewer cases. Now that's the fix for the future. That's how we stop the wasted resources. What we've got is 4,000 cases now. So how are we going to take care of that so that these future adjustments can help? And that's just going to involve a leader with humility to look around and say, we've got to have some help. And I'll be honest with you, we've got to have some help. There are agencies across the state, the Attorney General's office, sometimes the Office of Prosecution Services, other DA's offices that will loan prosecutors to no cost to the taxpayers. They will loan prosecutors to come in and help us get these cases tried. And it also will probably involve the DA's office entering into contracts, at least on a temporary basis, with some experienced litigators here in the county who will come in for a year or so, and every jury trial term will strike it up with us, and we'll start prosecuting these cases. Will give us more prosecutors in the courtroom so that we can nail down and get rid of the 4,000 that are out there in a good way. We can't sacrifice quality for efficiency. We have to have efficiency, but we cannot sacrifice quality prosecution. We cannot sacrifice the needs of the victims and law enforcement. So you've got to balance those two things out, and we can do it. We're just going to have to ask for a little bit of help and start doing things differently, and I can do both.